Welcome to the Heroic Investing Show. As first responders, we risk our lives every day. Our financial security is under attack. Our pensions are in a state of emergency. A single on-duty incident can alter or erase our earning potential instantly and forever. We are the heroes of society. We are self-reliant and we need to take care of our own financial future. The Heroic Investing Show is our toolkit of business and investing tactics on our mission to financial freedom.
Welcome to the Heroic Investing Show, a podcast for first responders, members of the military, veterans, and anyone looking to improve their financial future and gain some freedom with their time. We teach America's heroes how to build passive income, build their startup business, and safely grow wealth through real estate and other alternative investments. We help current and prior first responders put protections, systems, and a team in place to help them build a life where they can focus on their passion, that service or product that they are uniquely gifted to share with others, making the world a better place for all of us. My name is Gary Pinkerton, and I co-host this show with Jason Hartman. This is episode 225. Today's guest is author Phil Haney. He's a founding member of the Department of Homeland Security, or DHS, in 2002. He talks about on this episode how he volunteered there without being paid for quite a while before transitioning into a Customs and Border Protection officer and eventually up to an armed CBP officer. And he spent a lot of time in intelligence, in briefing the leadership of DHS. And his background is entomology. He's an agriculture officer, a CBP agriculture officer. He served at DHS several tours of duty at the National Targeting Center near Washington, D.C., and only recently moved back to his home state of California, where he grew up. So he has a fascinating story about having been put under the microscope by the same individuals who are currently running the impeachment trials circus, if you will, against President Trump. And he talks about how this is a threat to our constitutional republic, and how so many people get wrong this republic versus democracy, and how actually he hopes and prays that it goes to the Senate so that we can once and for all get ourselves back on the right track. This is really compelling for me, and I appreciated what he's done for our country and what people like him in bringing all of this to light and educating our public what that can do to keep this amazing experiment that our heroic founding fathers started 250 years ago. Please join me in a walk down memory lane about what this country was founded for and what it's about, and how the circus we see playing out is actually going to make us stronger. Thanks so much, and enjoy this conversation with Phil Haney. Thanks very much for joining us here on Heroic Investing. Well, Phil, let's talk about your career and what led you up to all of your time in both Border Patrol as well as Department of Homeland Security. I mean, you were a founding member of DHS. What was that like when it first got stood up?
Well, it was in the aftermath of 9/11, so everything had a high sense of urgency and a very serious focus, sense of purpose. And that's why I often mention that I'm a founding member. It's not just to bring attention to myself. I'm trying to set a baseline moment. I saw everything that happened subsequently from literally the very first day. It's not like I merged in with the flow of traffic some 3, 4, 5, 10 years down the road and just decided there were things I didn't like about the way they were operating within the agency. No, I saw it from the very first day. And my background in entomology as agricultural scientist, I focused on the Middle East. And so I worked in the Middle East a lot before 9/11. So that gave me the grounding. You know, it wasn't never theoretical for me.
Yeah.
And when 9/11 happened, I knew intuitively, immediately, the ideology and the worldview of the people that did it. And I volunteered. I went and saw Max Cleland. He was the Democratic senator from Georgia. And you might remember him. He was well known for being a triple amputee from the Vietnam War era. And again, I only mention Democrat, not because of partisan, but at that time in our post 9/11 era, you know, those walls weren't there much. You know, it was Democrat, Republican in name only at that time. And he wrote a letter on my behalf to Tom Ridge, who was the original secretary of what was called the Office of Homeland Security. It wasn't even a department yet. And long and short of it is I went in as a volunteer and very quickly started doing intel briefings. Since I'd worked in the Middle East and I'd studied Quranic Arabic and the strategy and tactics of the global Islamic movement, I knew what they were saying and what they really meant. And I would prepare these briefings and send them up the chain of command. And at first, no one really knew what to do with me. They didn't really understand what I was sending to them. But they did create a special unit called the Intelligence Review Unit. And I started working on the real hard cases, you know, the ones that no one else was really particularly familiar with. And that led me eventually to being assigned to the National Targeting Center up in Washington, D.C., what I call the secret squirrel headquarters of DHS. And there I worked on a very large global level case called the Tablighi Jamaat Initiative. And that may or may not be a familiar name, but it's got a very familiar connection to us, and that is San Bernardino, as well as actually Orlando. And I also worked on the Muslim Brotherhood network operating in the United States. So the two major global level Islamic groups that I focused on are the ones that ended up giving me in all kinds of trouble with the Obama administration. And that's when I became eventually known as the whistleblower. Not because I chose it, but because I was simply doing the job that I took my oath to do, to protect our Constitution and threat both foreign and domestic. And I found myself in the middle of a real storm that we're actually seeing play out virtually every day right now. I ended up getting investigated 9 times by people in my own agency, and the roster of people that had been going after President Trump since literally the day that he was elected, if not inaugurated, is exactly the same roster of people that were going after law enforcement officers like myself inside the agency for years before we ever heard about President Trump becoming or running for president. The same literal roster. So now I've got this nexus between the global level Islamic terrorism aspect and right in a sense right in the middle of the heart of the political storm that we're seeing going on right now here in Washington, there in Washington, D.C. I'm connected to both of them through what I did in my background as a CBP officer, Customs and Border Protection, and in the intel community. So I'm standing like right in the middle between two as a literal eyewitness to history. Because I know these people. They came after me. I know how they operate. So nothing that they do surprises me. I wish I couldn't or didn't have to say that. I would like to get surprised once in a while, but I don't get surprised very often, to be the truth. And,
yeah,
and
well,
I
you've
guess
been around it a long time, right?
That's right. It's like, it's pretty predictable, unfortunately.
Yeah, gosh. So you're, of course, in your book, See Something, Say Nothing, Homeland Security Officer Exposes the Government's Submission to Jihad. So a lot of this comes out your side, but none of the Trump replay of everything, right? This stuff we're seeing again being replayed.
No, actually, the people that are after Trump are in the index of the book.
Right. Yeah, I understand. But it was published before any of that stuff came out, right?
Well, yeah. And that that kind of verifies my story, doesn't it?
It does.
I simply took those threads, those pieces, and wove them into the fabric of the story. Not because I foresaw that like 4 years later, from May of 2016, these same people are going to go on and play prominent roles on the national big screen, the national stage. No, I didn't know that. I just wove their parts of the story as it existed then into the book, and lo and behold, they've come out and now they're national prominent, on the national political stage. Whether you like them or you don't like them, they played the major role in the subsequent events, which means that they were doing these kind of things a long time before President Trump ever decided to run for president. And when he won, they were essentially forced out of cover. They had to come right out into the open. And that's basically what happened.
So from an insider's view, and for those of us who aren't paying too close of attention to the drama here, interpret what's going on here, and if you want to give a prediction of what happens, that's great as well. But I'd love you to talk about your reasoning for it going to Senate as well.
It's a desperate. They're desperate. They're so compelled by their ideology that they're violating due process, procedure, and policy. I call them the 3 Ps. And it's going to come back. The precedents that they're setting by violating these 3 Ps will be dissected with a fine in the Senate, which is why I hope that it does go to the Senate. Because eventually, enough is going to have to be enough, isn't it? If we have a constitutional republic and we have a checks and balances form of government, if one branch of the government, in this case the majority in the House, not even a full branch, half of one of the branches, can bring President Trump up on impeachment charges while violating every aspect of process and policy and procedure, that means, my friend, none of us are secure. None of us. And if it were ever to go to a majority, meaning doing away, for example, with the electoral college, then if you're on the wrong side of the majority, the main reason why that's such an important point is that you have no basis for appeal. You want to see a foreshadowing of it, look at the way they're conducting the hearings now. There is no clear basis for appeal. There has not been any structure built into the proceedings for the usual concept of a court hearing or a hearing like what we're used to ever since we were little kids. That's been left out. And if they establish that precedent, then who is a person like you or me or anybody else that's listening, who are we going to appeal to?
Yeah, it's definitely...
That's why it's so important.
It's definitely extremely sobering. Why do you think, I would say most people wouldn't say that President Trump is an individual they would point to say this person is always going to be above the fray. He's not going to get mixed up in it. But yet he's letting this play out. And sure, he tweets about it, but he's not trying to bring in the strong arm of the executive branch to stop the nonsense. Like, why is that? Why do you
That's
think
going to be his greatest legacy. Why?
Yeah.
Because it's obvious he's demonstrating by his actions he does believe in a constitutional republic. Yeah. And even though it's like watching sausages be made, he is allowing the process to go forward. But it also tells me, based on what I feel like I know about his character and his personality, that he has cards to play that he's not showing yet.
Yeah.
And the reason why he's not paralyzed by fear and anxiety is because he knows more than he lets on an everyday basis. And that when this is all said and done, that a lot more will be coming to light. As bad as it is now, imagine if there wasn't an agent provocateur, as some might call him, in a position of authority like President Trump. And I don't need to imagine it, actually. I've already seen how they operate.
Yeah.
And that there is no basis to appeal. I was investigated 9 times by the very same people. Not once. Depending on how you want to divide up what they've been doing with President Trump. Was there Russiagate? Was there, the different phases? Then it became the Steele dossier. Then it became now Ukraine. however you want to divide it up. If that's one big investigation or maybe two or three littler ones that are kind of connected. Imagine going through that for a 10-year period 9 times and surviving it.
So when you left the agency, you left in good stead, and all of that was behind you.
Yeah, I have retired honorably. I mentioned that as well, not to draw attention. The fact that it's actually a miraculous thing. The fact that I was actually able to retire honorably. You imagine how many different times over that 10-year period that I could have crashed into the wall at any given moment, made the slightest misstep. It's like trying to navigate a submarine in the Mariana Trench with no sonar. How would you manage to do it?
Yeah, that would be challenging.
That would be a gnarly experience, wouldn't it?
It would definitely be. It would definitely be. What advice do you have? So you've endured something that obviously was longer than most of us have to endure anything at all. And there was no fairness to it, I guess I would call it. I mean, it's a due process, but you can call it fairness. What advice do you have for people out there who are, slogging through something that seems like it's not going to end?
It's actually not that. It's very simple, friend. It's like an oath. When you get to the place where you make the determination that you're going to stand on what's right and true, no matter what, it simplifies everything. It's not complicated. Yeah. And then you just have to, if you have faith, now would be a good time to exercise faith in the fact that the truth and what's right will eventually prevail. But you have to be aware that you could lose everything.
Yeah.
There was no certainty of outcome for me. I could have just as well been in jail. I could have just as well been simply fired and lost my pension and been discredited and basically not able to talk to people like you, because there would have been a question mark fluttering around in the closet, and it would have been just enough to keep most people from ever talking to me.
Sure.
But thankfully, they were never able, ever once, to stick a hook in me on any of the things that they tried to charge me with. Because I stood up, I never exaggerated, and this would be another piece of advice: always tell the truth. And the other thing, especially speaking to the guys, be careful about how you behave yourself. Don't get yourself involved in things that are going to come back and bite you. And with us guys, we all know it's a pretty short list, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Same thing that most guys get in trouble with are the same things that you will get in trouble with if you're not careful. So you have to maintain your integrity. You can't have any holes in your armor. And you got to stand up no matter what and not back down. Now, have I gotten any remedy yet? Have I been invited to the White House and gotten a Medal of Freedom? Or have I been compensated? Have I been asked to come back and work in the federal government? Nope. But I know today, next week, next month, next year, somewhere along in the process, that the truth of what I said will come out. Maybe it'll be the historians of the next generation. But I made it easy for them because I never exaggerated. I always told the truth. I laid it all out in very straightforward narrative. And every day that goes by, that book that I wrote becomes more and more valuable as a piece of historical document, because all the names and all the dates are there, the footnotes are there, the letters that it's all there. And by the way, I'm going to write another one, a follow-up. It's going to be called National Security Meltdown. And I even bought the domain so nobody could steal the name from me. So National Security Meltdown. Do you believe we've had a meltdown?
Well, I believe it's sick.
In some respects, at least, not a total meltdown. Is it? Can it be fixed? Can it be remedied? Yes.
Yeah. As long as we address it at some point, yeah?
That's my point, is that everybody can relate to a meltdown. It's either an emotional meltdown, a reactor meltdown, God forbid, on a submarine. That's the scariest word there is, isn't it? A meltdown.
Absolutely.
But all of us in some way or another can relate to it, this thing called a meltdown. And what I'm talking about is a national security meltdown. And we're seeing it in the abuse of process that I referred to earlier, or procedure, or policy. That's a meltdown, a form of one.
Yeah, and to your point, when we were talking back, I love you brought this up. I wanted to bring the point up as well, but you did a great job when I asked you that question about why is Trump remaining above this? Because he could not do a better job. Like they're creating their own social proof with playing this out the way they are. Like he would be crazy to stop it, really. So I have a question though. Like, why would I believe it's your I think it is your belief that impeaching Trump would backfire big time for the Democrats. Not just this circus that we're going through, but if they actually succeeded, which I know you said it before we started airing here that you don't think it will, and I agree. I don't think it will either. But if it did, that would be a big backfire. Why is that?
Well, impeachment is one thing. They probably will impeach him. They said they were going to do that from
removed from office. Yeah, I misspoke. Removed from office is what I meant. Yeah. But
to force it into the court, into the daylight, that's basically what our legal system is the antidote, the antiseptic to this abuse that we've been seeing. If you look up on the web, I wrote a little editorial. It's called Impeachment is the Paradox of Liberty. Impeachment is the paradox of liberty. And I point out that it's just exactly that. It's structured into our form of government in order to prevent any particular leader, including the president, from becoming a tyrant, of taking over the entire, becoming a dictator. Thank God for the vision of our founding fathers. They knew human nature very well, and they built this provision. But you notice that they really didn't define it, because if they had over-defined it, then it would have been a narrower avenue to use it. And so they basically allowed the House to impeach the president on anything that they can prove might be high crime and misdemeanor. They can charge him with sneezing too many times, which is basically what they're doing with this procedure. But ultimately, they're going to have to bring it to the docket, meaning the Senate. And the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court is the judge of the trial. And that's when all the evidence that has been disregarded so far will be brought out. And if we're ever going to recover ourselves, or as President Lincoln said, disenthrall ourselves from the difficulties that we're in right now, we're going to have to go through this national catharsis, where we literally lay it out on the table and once and for all go from A through B through Z and lay it on the table so that everybody in the country can see it. And that is why it's a paradox, because the thing that is designed to prevent us from going into tyranny can be abused to create tyranny, meaning the impeachment process, which is what we're seeing right now. So it's a great paradox. But if we didn't have that option, then we really wouldn't be in control of our own government. And the paradox is that it can be used surgically, or it can be abused like it is right now. But thank God for the system of government that we have, because as unpleasant as it is to watch the whole thing go forward, it's exactly what we need to happen in the form of government that we have.
Yeah. Well, that was very well said, and I love your emphasis on constitutional republic and not democracy, and obviously you have studied it very well and you've lived it and it's in your soul, and this has been a tremendous talk. I really do appreciate it. I had an interesting podcast that I did back, I guess it was 4th of July, maybe this year, maybe the year before, but it was a dive down into the difference and why it makes a big difference. And your conversation, frankly, I don't remember. I think it was maybe off air before we started, but you were talking about if we ever did divulge or fall down into a majority vote.
Yeah, we have a majority without the Electoral College.
Right. Yeah.
Then your one party becomes, they're the judiciary, they're the executive, and they're legislative. Yeah. And if you're on the other side of the narrative, God help you.
Right.
There's no place to appeal.
There's no recourse at all. That's right.
None whatsoever. Yeah. I'd like to mention one more quick thing. It's a little bit of a trick question.
Okay.
A few months ago, Jerry Nadler said that President Trump's behavior was a threat to our democracy. That was his words, Jerry Nadler, chairman of the House Judiciary, who's running the hearings right now, literally as we speak. My trick question is, was Jerry Nadler right? Is Trump a threat
to our republic?
I'll have to add the caveat that it's Nadler that said our democracy.
Oh, yeah.
So I'll say, is President Trump a threat to their democracy?
Absolutely he is. I appreciate you kind of emphasizing there. Absolutely he is, because they want a democracy, and he's going to stop it. He's going to keep the republic solid.
We don't have a democracy.
Right.
And every time they say that, which would be a little homework assignment for everybody, anytime somebody in the House or the Senate in any political office says that someone is a threat to our democracy, that's a dead giveaway. They don't know what they were elected to represent. They weren't elected to represent a democracy. They're elected to represent a constitutional republic. And I don't know if they realize how Freudian it is when they say that.
I was just going to say that. I'm glad you said Freudian, because it's either that or they're showing their hand. they're either an idiot or they're showing their hand.
Yeah, however you want to put it. That they're showing that they don't even actually recognize what they were elected to represent. Yeah, and so somebody like Trump is, or you, or me.
Yeah, that's so well said. Thank you so much. We're at the end, we're past it a little bit, but this has been tremendous. Phil, how can anybody reach out to you if they want to talk more or hear more? How can they find out more?
Well, I am on Facebook.
Okay.
I'm on Facebook as the Philip Haney that lives in Plymouth. If you query me, you'll find two of me. One's a shell account, and the other one is the real one. It's the Plymouth, California. That's the ID. Philip Haney that lives in Plymouth. You can email me. My email is really easy. It's my last name, Haney, Haney, _ not dash, _ Philip, Phil, 1L, at yahoo.com. You can send me a message through Facebook, or you can just send me an email. And I have a little shell website that I'm going to be building on, and it is nationalsecuritymeltdown.com, I think it is. There's really not much there, but it'll be growing in the next few weeks and months. But the best way right now is Facebook and or email. I always respond, not necessarily in 5 minutes, but I always respond.
That's awesome. Well, you have you're in retirement and you have some wonderful sunshine. We'll give you a pass on immediate response. Phil Haney, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate your time today.
You're welcome. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you so much for listening. Please be sure to subscribe so that you don't miss any episodes. Be sure to check out the show's specific website and our general website, hartmanmedia.com, for appropriate disclaimers and terms of service. Remember that guest opinions are their own, and if you require specific legal or tax advice or advice in any other specialized area, please consult an appropriate professional. And we also very much appreciate you reviewing the show. Please go to iTunes or Stitcher Radio or whatever platform you're using and write a review for the show. We would very much appreciate that. And be sure to make it official and subscribe so you do not miss any episodes. We look forward to seeing you on the next episode.